everyone. I know I really can't pull this hat off. I'm sorry. The fact is, my kids got me this hat, so I want you guys to vote here in the beginning here. So my kids got me this hat. I have this hat because my hair is just too long in these days. So I have this hat, which my kids got me, the internet famous hat. I thought hilarious.
Does that seem like a legend in your own mind hat?
Yes, I think so.
So I don't think this is I think I'm going to go with this hat instead. But I like the internet famous hat. So anyway, for some reason very cold today anyway, so I was outside, just can't get rid of the chill. But let's get into the show right off the bat. It's opening day in baseball. That's why Russ Cohen is not here today.
Well, it was opening day for the Mets, but it was opening day yesterday, and I already have a bunch of Yankee fans who are friends of mine who are like, "Oh my God, they lost." I mean, okay, it's one game. It's opening day. It's one of 162. So cool your jets. Calm down.
I think so.
I don't think that the Yankees are going to be good this year, but losing the opener in Tampa Bay is hardly the end of the world.
Yeah.
Well, it is Tampa Bay, though. I mean,
I know.
I know, but it's opening day for me too. I'm a Tigers guy. So 4:00 today, they're opening up in Chicago, and I'm going to my goal is to do this podcast and then write my story. And then maybe go to the store for snacks and then watch the Tigers. So,
and coincidentally, my goal is to do the webcast, write my story, and head to the KeyBank Center for the Leafs Sabres game. Which, as we know, even though the Sabres are out of the playoffs, it doesn't matter because when they play Toronto, they're world beaters.
We will get to that in a second. Here we go. Let's start. And it's opening day, so the magic number for the Phillies is what? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, April 3rd, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
And I'm Kevin Allen. I'm impressed that Eck got the date and day right out of the gate. So, and I'm from USA Today Sports, by the way.
Yes, he is. That's why he always has the dates right. And I'm a blogger. That's why I don't have to have the dates right. And I have to say the hello elongated was just so I made sure I didn't screw it up. So there you go. But I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday. I'm usually not this hip, really not. I'm wearing a toque if you're in Canada, or a hat if you're in the U.S. I guess. Yeah. So anyway, we want to get into things, and I just want to start off today by saying that history has been made today. I miss the old history will be made commercials that they used to know in the NHL. I thought they were actually very cool as far as NHL commercials go, where they would show history was made. History was made last night as the first team to ever win 10 games in a row in a season and not make the playoffs. Occurred. The Philadelphia Flyers were eliminated last night, and that is the first time a team has won 10 games in a row in a regular season and not made the playoffs that same year. So the Flyers are out. And this is a shame because they were playing well as of late, but it's just one of those things. It was a really rough year. When you sit back at a bunch of fans who were talking to me last night, and they were saying, it just sucks. They're out of the playoffs. And I said, yeah, but they're playing so well. But when you look at them, ask yourself, are they really a playoff team? I always say that to myself. Do they really feel like a playoff team? And no, they don't.
Well, I mean, they've had their share of difficulties this year. The goaltending situation, it's sort of, Mason played well for a while. Then, I think the thing that puzzles me is they were 1 point behind Toronto in the wild card race. Mason was playing great, and they played Neuwirth in that game in Toronto. And I think ever since that game, things basically fallen apart. Now, not to say that in and of itself was the cause, but it was just a strange decision, and things seemed to unfold from that. I mean, overall, I think the thing I take away from the Flyers is Gostisbehere had a difficult sophomore season. I don't know if you could consider it a sophomore jinx, but he didn't play with the type of impact that he had last year. Giroux did not have a good year at all, and I don't know if that was tied to injury or not, but there are things to look forward to because I think Provorov played well, and Wayne Simmons had another really good year. So, Ron Hextall is going to have to be a little busy in the offseason and make a few tweaking changes maybe, and maybe next year they get back in.
I mean, I think what Mike said too, really speaks to the issue. It's like, and we're all guilty of this. We expect too much out of younger players. I mean, Provorov did have a very good, first season, but I think they were counting too heavily on him, which really, in my mind, kind of spoke to the whole problem. Like, they really weren't quite as ready as we wanted them to be, and they had to have everything go right, and most things did not go well, for them. I mean, Gostisbehere went through, and we call it a jinx, but it's a realistic situation, especially in the NHL, where guys have exceptional rookie seasons, and then when you're a rookie, you sort of play on instinct, you play on adrenaline, and then in the second season, when you've had a summer to kind of think about what you've accomplished and what you did that were successful, I think self-doubt creeps in. I think there's greater expectations, and it's just harder. And then I think by the third year, you kind of figure it out. So I don't think it's that this season for Gostisbehere is an indication that he's not going to be a player. I think it's an indication of how difficult the league is, and how in the second year it's not as easy for you as the first year. I mean, I live in Detroit, and there's been a lot of discussion about Dylan Larkin. Maybe he's not the player that everyone thought he was, but I think it's a similar situation. I think the expectations were too high for a second-year player. In the exit interview of the first year, I'm sure they said to him, hey, you've got to be more offensive. You've got to be, we're counting on, I mean, I'm sure they didn't phrase it like this, but they were counting on him this year perhaps being, the next Steve Yzerman. And so I think there's a lot goes in there. But I think Philadelphia, to me, was kind of the team that I thought they would be, where, there were times when you thought they had enough talent to be very successful this season, as they did during their long winning streak. But, what else is forgotten and what hasn't been brought up is, their division, as we know, was pretty incredible this year. And I think it was not a time for them to be a team in transition, where they were working in younger defensemen in Provorov and Gostisbehere, and still trying to be successful. And I've never believed that two goaltenders is the way to go. If you come in and you're not quite sure how your goaltending is going to work out, I think that's usually problematic.
And ironically, the Flyers are back to that same crossroads that they've faced a number of times in their history, is now with the goaltending. What do you do? I mean, I don't think that the answer is there. I don't think that they have confidence enough in Mason to be a pure number one, or Neuvirth to be a pure number one. And does that mean they go after Ben Bishop in free agency? Does it mean they make a trade for somebody else who might be available? I mean, that's the question. And this is like, do they sign Curtis Joseph, or do they sign John Van Beesbrook? And they signed Van Beesbrook, and the road that they went down. So, Ron Hextall might have a little
really happy, Mike, in that,
Well, yes, but Ron Hextall may have a little more insight, because he was I think a great goaltender at times in his NHL career, and maybe he will have more insight to know which one to choose. So, we'll see.
And they're facing the same issue this summer at Van Beesbrook and Curtis Joseph, in the form of Ben Bishop and Ryan Miller, or
right.
Whatever it is. It's a different era and a different time, but choosing the right goalie in the off season will be, important to me, and maybe Ryan Miller is the wrong choice, because Miller wants to go on to the West Coast, so he probably wouldn't even entertain that. But my point is still the same. It'll come down to, who are they going to choose this summer?
I think there will be goalies available. I mean, at least if we hear the Corey Crawford stuff still out there too, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, I talked to somebody that really matters, and Corey Crawford is the Blackhawks goalie.
Okay.
Darling has let's just say that Darling knows that he'll be on the free agent marketplace.
There you go.
This season, this summer, and I think Darling could be another Talbot. Part of the issue with goalies is that we start them later, so. When you're his age, what is he, 29? Mike, do you know the answer to that?
I believe so. I think he may actually be 30, but let me double check.
He could be 30, yeah. But anyway, the point is still the same, that, it's not unusual for a goalie to sort of be given his chance later on. And I think Darling could actually be an effective goalie. Like, he could be, like, if I was Las Vegas, I might be interested in Darling as a signing as a free agent, because I don't think they're going to get the goalies that everybody thinks they are. When you look at their options, I don't see that they're setting goal by any stretch.
Yeah.
Fleury gets traded to some other team,
right?
Like, who are their goalies really going to be? Are they going to be Subban from Boston? I don't have an answer to that.
Right.
So.
Scott Darling is 28, and Cam Talbot will be 30 in July.
Yeah, but I think Talbot, when he went to Edmonton, was about that age too. 28 was
27, 28. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Darling could be an interesting sort of pickup. One of the guys I wanted to talk about today when you asked me to come on, because I've really been impressed by this, and I'm guessing you two, I have been too. Following the Art Ross Trophy race and the way that Connor McDavid has sort of taken charge. And I looked up to make sure, I wanted to make sure of my numbers, but he's got 9 points in his last 5 games, and he's really been, I think, just totally impressive what Connor McDavid is doing, kind of closing out he had 3 points against Anaheim, he had 2 against San Jose, and he had another goal against the Kings. So 3 goals and 6 points in his last 3 games. He's been +5 in that, and really have taken charge of the scoring race. And the fact he's going to get 100 points, at his age, in his first real full season. I mean, you forget that he only had a half season last year, so he came into this with only 40 some games played. I know we had incredible expectations of him, and so maybe we're supposed to say, well, yeah, we expected him to do this, and I did write it in the preseason that I expected him to compete for the scoring championship. But I think he's been really impressive, and I think what he's done in the to close out the season has been even more impressive than he's been. Like, I watched the game the other night, and gosh, he's such a horse out there. You just got to saddle him out and ride, So
he does everything so quickly. Everything at such a high speed still. And for those people who want to complain about the World Cup of Hockey making guys tired, I'm sorry. McDavid seems fine. McDavid played at the World Cup of Hockey a ton of ice time, and he's accelerated as the season's gotten on, right?
He's younger, Ak. I mean, he's 19 years old.
I still think that, he's, for sure. I mean, how do we relate him in relation to other superstars' second seasons, I guess, is the big thing. I mean, this is not really his first season, but
yeah. Well, Crosby had was over 100 points. I think we'd have to call it up. I think he for sure was over 100 in his second season, but it might have even been his first. I can't remember.
105, I think, in his second season. I'll look it up. Yeah.
Yeah, let's look it up. But I mean, basically, Connor McDavid is right there because the game has changed. I mean, it's been 11 years since Crosby played, and in that 11 years, it's gotten even tighter to score goals. And I think 100 points is far more significant than it was in Crosby's first year. And if you remember, Crosby came out of the rule reformation.
Yeah.
So we were letting players play.
That's right.
Not leave in that first season as well. And I'm not going to say that Connor McDavid is better than Sidney Crosby because I just think that's just unfair. It's hard to compare here. But I think they're, basically what I'm saying is he's been Crosby-esque in his, Connor McDavid, Crosby, and the way they started, it's very, very similar. And I think they're going to have, very similar impact. It'll be interesting to see whether Connor McDavid would sort of follow the Crosby model. If you remember with Sidney, is he worked on each offseason, he worked on something to make himself better. I remember one year I talked to him and it was about face-offs and it's about getting better defensively and all that. He was really committed to doing that. So it'll be interesting to see if McDavid does that. And, at the All-Star game, and I thought this was really, and we all wrote it because it was such a significant story, but Wayne Gretzky, who obviously works for the Oilers now, and, I think part of his job description, although it's, just understood that he is to mentor Connor McDavid. And what has he told Connor McDavid? That the man you're trying to emulate, to dethrone, is indeed Sidney Crosby. And I really love that. I just think to me, that's what sports are about. And anybody who thinks that there's something wrong with that, really shouldn't be, following sports, because that's what it is. And I appreciate the fact that Gretzky is such a sports fan that he has no problems pointing to someone else in a different team and saying, that guy there, that's the guy you should be watching. That's the guy you have to pass because he's the best. And I love that about Gretz, that he's willing to say that. He's willing to tell his guy, Connor McDavid, that, you're not there yet. That Crosby, he's done too much. He's accomplished. That's the guy you got to pass. So I think this is fun. And I think Connor McDavid, it won't take him long he's already there, right there with Crosby. Yeah. But at some point, will we say, I still say Crosby's the best player simply because he's just accomplished too much. But, by next year, I may be saying something different just because of McDavid. So
Gretzky is always driven by the Mario Lemieux competition and stuff. And, and I think that's why it was great for the game back then. And it's interesting to see if we're going to are we setting up for, a McDavid, Crosby, Lemieux, Gretzky type thing? Or are we looking at, we have other superstars as well in the league, obviously what Matthews has done in his first year is phenomenal too. So,
well, first, Crosby had 102 as a rookie, 120 as in his second year. Yeah. So, but to me, the suspense for the Hart is not if McDavid is going to win. It's now who's going to be the third guy voted, or third guy in the top three who gets nominated, because it's going to be Crosby, it's going to be McDavid. Who is it going to? Is it going to be Brent Burns? Is it going to be Brad Marchand? I mean, that to me, that's the only suspense, because I think McDavid is clearly going to win the Hart. I mean, right now he's just turned on the afterburners, as you said, Kevin, in the last couple of weeks when it was necessary for Edmonton to win. And now it's very plausible they could win the Pacific Division and have home ice until the conference final.
Yeah, no, it's really been impressive. And what you do last, people remember that, and the fact that he's done this so late in the season. I mean, when Corey Perry won the MVP that one year, the reason he won it is because he was scoring goals at an incredible pace in the final. I don't remember if it was 15 games, but he had like a zillion goals. He was in a goal per game pace at the end there, and that's what I think we all remembered at the end when we were voting. And I think the same thing will be true here with, as Mike pointed out, with Connor McDavid. And it's interesting. I thought it was a month ago I wrote a column where I thought Brent Burns was going to run away with MVP, and then since then, it was the Kevin Allen jinx almost. As soon as I wrote that column, he's gone cold in terms of his offensive production. And for a defenseman to do that, he's got to be so dominant. I think he was just like 8 or 9 points out of the lead in points when I wrote that. And I think he was 5th in scoring or somewhere around there. And now, he's 20 points behind. He just hasn't scored at that pace. So I don't know that he's going to be in the top three. I think you got to look at, Patrick Kane and some of the other guys now. So it'll be interesting to see. But one other point about this, and this will be interesting because I know Mike's a multi-sport fan, so he'll appreciate this too. I was just in a conversation with someone about fantasy baseball and the projection of teams, and both of us had read an article talking about that it's been proven statistically that the prime of baseball players' career is between 26 and 32. And I found that so amusing because we are now entering a phase in the NHL when it sure feels as if the prime of the players' careers in our league now is like 20 and 21 and 22. Like the game now, it just seems to be the young man's game, to be sure.
I think it's really interesting. My theory on this is that, and I said this before, I think that it is a young man's game right now, but I don't think those young men are going to be that much worse 8 or 9 years from now. I think what's happening is, I think it's just the better training has come in, and we're seeing this new wave of well-trained athletes who, and NHL players who do everything faster, who do everything quicker, who've been eating, they weren't raised on, Fluffernutter sandwiches. these guys are just completely, they're honed in, and that means I think their careers are going to extend even longer. Like look what Crosby is still doing, obviously. 10 years later, right? Crosby still.
Is this the kale quinoa generation of?
All right, I agree with you. It is and we laugh, but I think there's something to it. I mean, I just think that these kids are they're crazy athletes, and they are well-tuned machines, and they're who's to say what McDavid's going to be doing when he's in his prime, if his prime is 27 years old, like that to me is where was Crosby's prime really? I think Crosby's playing as well as he's ever played in his career right now.
Well, it's ironic that like when unrestricted free agency was at age 31, that used to be like the line of demarcation of when a player's prime was over with. After 30, 31, 32 years old, then things would drop off. Now it seems like with players coming in at 18 and 19 years old, at 28, which is around the time that most players get to unrestricted free agency, happens to be the mark that people think that their prime is over with. I don't know if that's sort of like a old wives' tale propagated by the teams, so they don't have to pay these players as much. That's probably not the case, but it just seems to me now that the prime years are getting younger and younger, or going lower and lower as we go forward. And I don't think it can go much lower because you can't start your career any earlier than age 18 or 19 anymore. So,
yeah, I mean, that's it. I agree. I mean, to your point, what's interesting, I looked up the goal scoring numbers here. So before the lockout, team was averaging 2.57 goals per game. We came out of the lockout, we jumped up to and that was 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. That was pretty consistent throughout the 90s, 2000s. And then, we jumped up after the lockout to 3.08 goals per game. So we got a half a goal better, right with the new rules. And
which is really significant, by the way. A half goal. I mean, when you think about all the games they play,
Oh, yeah. Well, you went from, it's crazy numbers. I mean, 2000 and, it's hard to exactly, get the numbers because there were different amounts of games played. I'm trying to find the exact amount of goals scored, but it's 3.08 goals per game, right? And then, since then, in Crosby's 120-point season, 2.95, so you're still right around 3, and now we're at 2.77, right? Yeah. So basically over the last, it really did, I would say from 2010 till now, it's been right around 2.77 the entire time. It's really gotten into a steady consistency from 2010 till this point. But there was definitely a burst there, first 5 years after the lockout, where we were way up, way higher than that. So, and those are the years that Crosby's putting up those major points. I mean, Crosby's third year was 2.78, which is now this year's 2.77. So that'd be interesting to see.
Well, and the thing about, and look, Mary Lemieux lost so many games because of illness and injury, and of course Bobby Orr. If Bobby Orr played under the modern surgical procedures that are available today, he would have been even more remarkable than he was. That's why people, some argue that he's the best player who ever won. But, Crosby's career also has been undermined by, the concussion issue that robbed him of really 2 seasons. And he's just had other issues as well. So now that'll be the key for Connor McDavid as well, who's already had early in his career. I mean, he's lost 1/2 a season because of that shoulder injury last year. And that's always going to be a problem. With the level of speed that players now play at, the susceptibility to injury is even greater in my mind. I mean, I don't know I have anything to back that up. It's just
it's by far greater.
Yeah.
So here's some fun perspective for you. 1985-86. You're in the prime of Gretzky world, right? Like 85-86. That's when teams are scoring like crazy. What were the goals per game at that point? Remember, I said it's 3.07 after the lockout. It's 2.77 this year.
Probably 4.5.
85-86
was 3.89.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we had some teams had some 400 goal seasons.
right.
Back then. But here's the thing, and when I tell this story, everybody, they think and they wax. There's such a romance with the 80s, but one of the reasons why there was so much goal scoring is, like, people think it was all about the offensive ability, but it really wasn't. It was about the mistakes.
Yeah.
Like at some, at some point coaches took over the game. And not only that, they changed the way that reporters wrote about the game. And, I was part of all that because I've been around so long. And how it happened is like this. When in the press boxes, we used to always run to the TV to figure out how the goal was scored. And then at some point, we ran to the TV to find out who made the mistake that resulted in the goal. And the reason why we did that is because coaches changed the way they talked to us about the game. They used to talk about, the great plays that were made and what we did to score goals. And then all of a sudden, because coaches realized that, there's such a disparity between the talent levels of, say, the Edmonton Oilers or the Pittsburgh Penguins and the other teams, the only means of for them to compete was to be better defensively. So they started talking about the mistakes that they made that prevented the other teams from scoring. And it's sort of been a gradual switch. But, when you watch those games now from the 80s in television, if you've seen any of the old games, what you see is a lot of mistakes. No coverage, no back pressure whatsoever. Like none.
No one back.
Like if you got a step on a guy, you were in. Yeah. Because I don't want to say they quit on the play, but the back pressure was non-existent because they're thinking, well, if the defenseman stops and gets it up to me, I might get a breakaway. So the game it wasn't quite as. It was fun because it was like a pinball game in terms of the scores were just going up, regularly. But it was a completely different game, and I don't think that the players in the 80s were more skillful than today's players. In fact, you can argue that today's players are more skillful, but the difference is today's players are far more well-schooled defensively. It's not even close. Like these kids all grow up into the game now, having been taught defense from the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah, I watched. I obviously watched games in the 80s, and I think there are more slower defensemen that played in the 80s than there are now. One thing, like Gilbert Perreault was somebody that I watched all the time being in Buffalo, and his trademark was the end-to-end rush. And he did that, like, not as much in the 80s because he was more of a veteran player, but in the 70s, he'd take the puck behind the net, he'd go through everybody, and he would do that 3-4 times a year easily, but maybe even more. You don't see that anymore because teams clog up the middle because the defensemen are quick enough to cut off that player. And when somebody tries to do it, what ends up happening is they end up giving away the puck at the blue line, and it ends up going the other way. So this game is a completely different game than it was in the 70s and in the early 80s, and that's why, like, somebody scoring 100 points now back in the 80s, it was okay. That's nice. Now it's really a feat. When you have one or two guys doing it, then it's a feat.
McDavid doing it this year with Edmonton is just 100 points this year is equal to 120 in Crosby's second year.
That's probably right. And the other issue. Two issues, skating and things like the actual skill set, like one-timers. Like Yari Curry was light years ahead of everyone else in his ability to one-time the puck. But, I would say 1 in 6, 1 in 7 players could one-time the puck when I first started covering the league. Today, Yari Curry has an average one-timer because everybody has learned how to do that. Like the worst players on every team can one-time the puck.
Right.
That's just a skill that has been refined over time. Just like, in the 50s and into the 60s, people refined the slap shot and, the snap shot just because, more and more people were arriving in the game having already mastered that. And that's what happened. And the other thing was the skating, like at least once a game. Like it used to be, I don't know, challenging is the right word, but when you pivoted from defensemen, when they pivoted to go skate backwards, sometimes they'd fall down. They weren't as adept at it as they are now. And, defensemen used to get beat wide because they weren't exceptional skaters. Well, everybody in this league now is an exceptional skater. There's nobody that, but back then you could. There were guys that you could roar around, and, you don't see that. You see it every once in a blue moon, but guys roaring around the outside of a defenseman, which happened all the time in the 1970s.
Yeah, I mean, every team had at least two defensemen who I would consider immobile. I mean, like Brad Marsh or Phil Russell. I mean, like on the Sabres, it would be like Bill Height, who was an excellent defensive defenseman, but he was not fleet of foot. Jerry Korab was the same type of guy, big, tough, but he really couldn't move that well. That was acceptable, or that was something that you could get away with because, you know, not everybody was a flyer back in that day, but now everybody, you know, every forward is at least an average speed, has average skating ability, and if they're not going to be in the league. So yeah, you defensively, especially, I think the mobility in their skating is the thing that most coaches look at now.
Yeah, a couple things before moving on to the Eastern Conference race, which I think is really the fascinating race to talk about today, too. I got a text from somebody in the NHL who said that Kevin's other guy is Brian Elliott. He's the other goalie. It's Ben Bishop and Brian.
Okay.
So that's your Van Beesbrook or Joseph decision.
Yeah, I don't dispute that. You know, my only point is there's always two good guys, and you got to make up your mind what to do.
Right.
It's hard to sometimes figure out.
Well,
you know, I mean, the Red Wings went through that. The one year they had to choose between Belfour and Curtis Joseph, if you remember.
Oh yeah.
And then they went Curtis Joseph, and it didn't work out. And then they ended up having to go back. They went to Dominic Hasek. He came back.
This often happens when a team like the Flyers have Connor Hart in the system. You know, like they have a goalie that they really feel strongly about, but he's still young, so they need that bridge goalie to get them there. That was really cool. So I thought that was pretty funny. All right, so let's get on to the Atlantic, because I'm taking a lot of heat for the Buzztron 9000's projections here, and I wanted to get with it because on Twitter I've been getting to the fact that I only have the Maple Leafs getting 1 point the rest of the way, and that is going to be considered strange. Now, first of all, before I say that any further, it's not me that has them getting 1 point the rest of the way. This is like a computer. I think the Maple Leafs are playing well enough that they're going to easily make the playoffs, and they are going to get points, and they're playing teams that don't have to win games, so. Yeah, even though these are tough teams, I'm just saying projection-wise, they have a tough schedule still to go. They don't have. This is not a cakewalk, and it starts tonight in Buffalo. So I want to show you guys something here. So this is basically how things are right now. Okay, so if we were to look, we've all seen this. Of course, this is where we are right now in the East. You know, you have the Bruins now have overtaken the Senators, and the Leafs are in. You know, so these are all 1 point apart. So Ottawa, Toronto, Boston, all really tight, right? That's all.
And Tampa's at 88, so they're 3 points behind.
Right after that, right? Now my thing has it ending like this, okay? Which is Montreal, Ottawa, Boston, and then Toronto at 92. You know, and the question is, you know, how. So first of all, how will this happen? Especially because it has Ottawa losing tonight to Detroit.
Well, I was going to say where the Buzztron 9000 may be lacking some information is the fact that the Ottawa Senators are falling apart, and it's not just losing; it's the fact that they're losing players. Carlson may not play.
Yeah.
Mark Mathot may be out for at least the first round of the playoffs with the Sidney Crosby special. And Cody Ceci got hurt in Winnipeg, and they're also without Zach Smith, who's one of their better forwards. So, I mean, they're hurting right now, and they're starting to feel it. And Craig Anderson has had some rough times the last couple of weeks. You know, you can't really blame him because he's played great all year. But they're the team that's falling apart right now. And Tampa, they got Tyler Johnson back yesterday, and they may get Stamkos back for the next game, which I think is in Boston on Tuesday. So the injuries are going to be a big factor in what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, this is how this plays out is crazy. I mean, well, Ottawa has Detroit twice, you know, and that's to their benefit right now, obviously, with these injuries.
Well, I'll just say this:
against Detroit at times in the past, so that's why the computer is going to say it's going to lose one and win one.
I'll just say this though: Detroit, you know. I mean, they're out of the playoffs. Obviously, they've had some injuries. They're not playing particularly well. They gave Toronto all they could handle on Saturday, and it was a game where, you know, the game was in doubt up until the last 3 minutes of the third period. So for a team that's struggling like Ottawa, you know, I don't think don't think Detroit's mailing it in. So it's gonna be a tough out for them. They're gonna back to back against Detroit, and then I think they play Boston, and then it's the Rangers and the Islanders.
Yeah, and they have that Boston's number, but again, like you said, all the injuries are going on here, so this is kind of crazy. The Rangers and the Islanders who also have the number, and the Islanders who knows what the Islanders will be playing for at that point. So Boston, has to go against Chicago, which is tough.
No, they beat Chicago. They have to go against
right. They already played Chicago, right? So they've got Tampa, and then they have Ottawa and Washington. So that's a tough one right there. So you're looking at tough.
All at home, which I don't know if that's good or bad. That may mean more pressure. But the thing about Toronto that I think the BuzzTron is taking into consideration, it's 5 games in 7 days. It's 2 back-to-backs.
Yeah. Yes, it is taking that into consideration, and it is also taking into consideration the fact that they play some pretty hefty teams there. They after Buffalo, which we've talked about before, is a problem for them always. That should be the easiest game they have left. But then they've got Pittsburgh, Columbus, and Tampa.
Yeah, Washington tomorrow night in the second of back-to-back, and they're playing Frederick Anderson tonight. So that means that they're probably going to play Curtis McElhinney in the second of back-to-back. Unless they lose in Buffalo, then maybe they go with Frederick Anderson on back-to-back nights. If Babcock thinks that they absolutely positively need to win, the one benefit is that there's no more travel after tonight. Their road schedule is done. They have 4 games at home, so they might be able to get away with playing Anderson on back-to-back nights. But that's the thing. Washington, they're sort of home and cooled out right now. They've got first in the Metro pretty much locked. So maybe the impetus is not there for the Capitals, but I also think that they realize maybe the Capitals don't want to face the Leafs in the first round, and if they beat the Leafs, in a way that gives them a better chance of playing Toronto. I don't know who they really want to play. Do they want to play Boston? Do they want to play Ottawa? Do they want to play Toronto? In a way, Washington can influence that by what they do and who they play down.
They want to play the Rangers, but that's not going to happen. So and historically, that's the team Washington does not want to play. That's the only team that really has a shot at knocking them out. If you were based on history.
I think the team that everybody wants to play right now is Ottawa because they're so injured.
Yeah, but Tampa, if you're not careful, can catch Ottawa, right? And then if does Washington want to play Tampa? I don't think so. That's the team that you don't want to play as well, right? They played well against Tampa, but you really don't want to play them.
Yeah, but there are 3 big games that are going to happen this week. One is Tampa-Boston. One is Ottawa-Boston, and the other one is Tampa-Toronto. Yep. And those are going to go far in determining where things are going to fall. It may go to the final game. It may go to that final game in Toronto between them and the Blue Jackets. And, again, the Blue Jackets aren't going to mail it in because they have a chance of getting second place in the Metro and getting home ice advantage over the Penguins. So,
yeah,
games are going to be
tough because Pittsburgh has a very tough schedule the rest of the way. So they are also in a spot, So it really gets – it's a fascinating ending to this thing, and the only thing that's really set in stone feels like is Montreal's going to play the Rangers. That's going to happen,
and Pittsburgh, Columbus, but
Pittsburgh and Columbus, right? But who's going to finish? Who's going to have home ice there? I tend to think it's going to be Columbus based on the way things are playing out, but we'll see. That could play either way, and that'll matter a lot because actually Columbus has a much better record at home against Pittsburgh than they do on the road. So if Columbus wants that home ice advantage in a big way. But then you look at the possible 2-3 in the Atlantic Division. Really, it's a crazy how that could play out.
Well, this is what I'm going to write about today for my column on Hockey Buzz is the fact that Toronto and they have in their power to play who they want based on what they do over the last 5 games. If they get 5 points, say they'll finish either second or third in the Atlantic. They will play either Ottawa or Boston. And people say, "Well, I want to play Ottawa." Ottawa, I think they went 1-1-2 against Ottawa, and that was Ottawa with everybody on hand. So maybe you take into consideration Ottawa's got injuries, and you want that Battle of Ontario where Toronto always had the psychological number on the Senators. But if it's me, I want to play the Bruins. I want to exercise the demons of 2013. It's not the same team, but this young group with a different coach with Matthews and Marner and all these young guys, but there's still guys there that lost in 2013. Kadri, Komarov, Van Riemsdyk, Gardner. They lost that heartbreaking series in 7 games. And I think it would do a lot for this franchise if they played the Bruins and beat them, but it's not guaranteed because the Bruins are playing well. But I sort of would like them to play the Bruins. But I think they want to avoid is not playing playing the Caps, because that'll be
Right.
the first run out.
Right. No, I mean the Caps you would think would be, but that's also that is a team that if I'm Washington, I don't want to play the Maple Leafs. That's just I really don't, because I really do have a strong feeling there that they could give you all kinds of fits. That's a team that you just don't want to play if you're the Capitals. I mean, if you're the Capitals, you'd rather play Boston, you'd rather play Ottawa. You don't want to play Toronto or Tampa. But looking at Toronto's, it's hard to it's history with Toronto is pointless because of the fact that they've been terrible for the last 2 years before this year. So, you can look at how they are right now, but Washington definitely has of those teams. Looking at them here, it looks like Ottawa might be the team that they've actually struggled against the most of Washington, Boston, and Toronto.
But again, that's out. I think that's up in the air when you're talking about at least.
I think that I mean
at least half of their top 4D are going to be out. At least it sounds that way. It sounds like they've already announced that CC, Mathot, and Zach Smith will be out for the rest of the regular season. So the last four games or 4
Yeah.
or 5 games.
Yeah,
that's a killer for them, and that means Anderson is going to have to step up, and it also means that Dion Phaneuf is going to have to probably play instead of 21 or 22 minutes. He's going to have to play 27 or 28 minutes.
Yeah, no, I mean Washington has owned Boston over the last 3 years. To the point where I don't know what their last game was, but I don't know if Boston has gotten any points out of any of those games. I was checking out right now and I was going through it. It's one of these.
The thing that we have to be careful about, like Toronto swept Boston.
Yeah.
Everything is out the window.
The playoffs are a totally different animal.
Yeah.
I mean, what you have with Boston is you definitely have some playoff experience in that room. That's when you look at Ottawa, you look at Toronto, you look at Boston. Boston's got the playoff experience for sure. You got the goalie who's been through the playoff run. You've got the defense that's been through the playoff run. You have Marchand, Bergeron. You've got these guys who've all been not just in the playoffs, but they went through the World Cup and Olympic runs. I mean, they've got the experience. The experience is in Boston, no question about it. Like, if you want to look just at playoff experience, they far surpassed Ottawa, and who even and of course completely surpassed Toronto, who has very little playoff experience at all. So, but there is something to the fact, I think, sometimes that teams with no playoff experience are fascinating to watch. When you have never been there before at all, when no one's been there and had a chance to go through it. That's why I think that's why I've been saying all the time, we've had this argument before, that I think it's so vital for them to get some playoff experience this year. And I think they're going to, and I think that it's going to help them because they need to get some playoff experience at some point, because this team might not be the team that takes it all the way to the cup, but they certainly will be there will be teams that will be expected to do better in the playoffs than this team is. So,
I mean, my argument's been, okay, I'm all for playoff experience if it's, quote, the right playoff experience.
right.
I don't think getting slammed by Washington in the first round, losing in 5 games, will be beneficial. I think being competitive, having a chance to win, and even if they lose, a team playing Ottawa, playing Boston, going to a game 6 or game 7, I think that's beneficial. But I just don't think there's any value in getting your butt kicked, and that's what I think would happen against the Washington. Although all the pressure would be on the Capitals because they're such an overwhelming favorite that the Leafs would be playing with house money. But still, I still think that they would be an overwhelming favorite, and they would probably in the end beat Toronto. And I don't say that with any particular glee because I'd like to see the Leafs win, but
yeah, no, I think that would be fair. I mean, you would definitely not expect that would be a huge upset, obviously, because the Capitals are picked not just to win the first round, but many are saying to go to the Stanley Cup, and
right,
it would be really shocking if they were to lose in the first round to the 8th seed. That being said, I don't know. So I find it hard to believe Toronto will be the 8th seed, even though that's what our BuzzTron is saying. I have a feeling that they're going to slip into higher than that. I really think that if I was to predict, based on my feeling about this, it'll end up Boston in 2nd, Toronto in 3rd, Tampa in the other wild card, and Ottawa will fall out of it. That's my feeling on it. Now I don't know whether that happens or not, but that's just
Well,
Tampa is coming hard, and there's no question that they're seeing there's a window open for them, and they see it.
And Stamkos is probably going to come back this week.
Yeah.
There was a lot of indications that he was going to come back on the weekend, but I think they got 3 of a possible 4 points. So every day, he gets better in terms of and feels more comfortable out there, and he's skating, not with a non-contact jersey. He's skating on a line with players who are active. So he's close. And motivationally, I mean, if he's in there on Thursday against Toronto at the ACC, I mean, the building will be electric if things all stand the way it is right now. But if the Leafs lose in Buffalo and lose to Washington on Tuesday, the Stamkos stepping in the lineup is going to send a scare into a lot of people in Toronto.
It's tough to bring a superstar like that back in the lineups. That's the one thing I worry about with Tampa. If I'm Tampa, I don't know if I really. I mean, we've seen it happen so many times. Obviously, you have Stamkos healthy. How you're not going to play him if he's healthy, right? And that's the whole argument. But at the same time, I remember, very well, Eric Lindros coming back for Game 7 of that series against the Devils, and when you sit back and you wait for that superstar to get back, and everybody's playing really well before that, and suddenly, you can't. Suddenly, you sit back and you watch Stamkos play because he hasn't played for such a long time. So everyone on the bench is sitting back watching Stamkos play. That can be a problem.
It can be, but I mean, the thing is, they did bring him back in Game 7 in Pittsburgh, and I didn't catch any kind of like sitting on your laurels and waiting for Stamkos to do.
No, but that was that was the best chance that anybody had to beat the Penguins, really, and that was a good. And there's still people who believe that a really bad offsides call destroyed Tampa from going further, right, in that playoff series. So I mean, it wasn't a bad call, but it was just overturned, in one of our crazy, by an inch type things, in highlights. So
can we just touch on and Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet reported on the weekend that a decision from the NHL is probably going to happen before the playoffs start on the Olympics.
Right.
He said it may happen this week. At the absolute latest, it will happen on Monday or Tuesday before the playoffs start, because the playoffs will start a week from Wednesday. The way things stand right now, with all the things that have come out, and now there's some reports out there that the IOC is not going to make any kind of compromises regarding advertising revenue, being able to use. I mean, all these things, they sound negative to me. Unless there's some great change of direction, they're not going. It's not happening.
I mean, I there's always two ways of thinking about this thing. By waiting this long, are they indeed trying to make it happen? That's one thing you have to think about. Is there an element of this of just trying to get the best deal? The NHL doesn't tend to, we know a lot about the NHL's negotiating tactics over the years, right? And this, to me, this is not that. This is not them trying to get a better deal. But that being said, who knows? I mean, the fact that it's not dead completely, is it not dead completely just out of some kind of a courtesy to NBC that they want to say they did everything they could because, NBC wants this? I think there's a lot more at play here. And it feels like there's a political aspect to it more than anything else right now, that they have to do everything they can so that NBC knows that they tried everything they could before they back out, because NBC wants them there. And NBC pays the NHL a lot of money, and they're going to be renegotiating a contract with NBC in the future. So there's a lot of elements that I think they have to be good. They have to be careful. But I don't think that there's anything they could really do right now, even though we've heard rumors of coming. They're going to pay this, they're going to take care of that, and then how no one knows how they're going to how the IHF is going to get the money to do any of that. I mean, there's so many issues that are at we heard they're going to pay for the insurance, they're going to pay for the travel, they're going to do all the other things, and the IHF isn't exactly flush with cash to do such a thing. So.
And the NHL, I mean, here's the thing that's funny. The NHL doesn't want the money from the IIHF. They don't want. They want what they had from the IOC, and the IOC will not budge. And I think that's what the whole crux of this situation is: the IOC. It's not the IIHF paying for insurance. And if that's the case, and they're implacable and they won't move, then I think it's going to hurt the Olympics if the NHL is not there, and I think in a way that's what the NHL wants, because this will teach the IOC a lesson that, okay, if we're not there, then it's going to be the Spengler Cup in Pyeongchang, and then that's not going to be appointment television for North American hockey fans.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, and that, of course, they could send the alumni players, which I
yeah, okay, please.
All right. Yeah, it was an idea. It was I needed something for April Fool's Day. I've tried my best in the past. I still think my favorite was naming all the teams in every city the same thing. That was still my favorite April Fool's joke. That was that everybody in Philadelphia would be called the Eagles, and everybody in Toronto would be called the Blue Jays. I like that idea the best. But that's all right. Or you call it baseball.
I think the baseball team would be called the Maple Leafs if that.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. But obviously there's not as many things to sell. That was pointed out to me. But yes, that was my favorite of those things. So let's get to the NHL draft simulator, shall we?
Yes.
Kevin Allen, I believe, has fallen off the
planet. Important phone call, so we forgive him.
Yes. It's fine. All right, so here we go. The NHL Draft Lottery Simulator coming to you live. All right. Today's winner is the Arizona Coyotes. Victory against the LA Kings last night that eliminated the LA Kings from the playoffs, and that's a whole nother story for another time to talk about. And then followed by the Detroit Red Wings and Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks seem to be in the same. Canucks, you got to take that thing away from you, Mike. The Canucks seem to be in this thing quite a bit, and this, of course, is not a good turnout for the Vegas Golden Knights, who are going to get the 5th pick if this happens. But Arizona, I think, is due, and the question is, will that player ever play in Arizona? That's another question for another day. So,
well, maybe not. the way things are going.
Depending on how it plays out, I guess he would next year. We would think that that guy is he's gonna make it into the league in the first year, but who knows? So tonight, only 3 games tonight. This is the lightest night left of the season. So if you're gonna do anything else, because after this, we go through the season. We've got a couple days off before the playoffs, but then you got mega games all the time. Of course, I'm going to be in Florida next week with my family for my annual trip to Florida. So I will be doing playoff buzzcasts from Florida, but that'll be fine as we get ready to promote and launch into the playoffs. But enjoy the games tonight. We do have the Maple Leafs game tonight. That's I think the big one to watch. That's the most interesting one. And
as an aside, the most interesting story is the fact that the Sabres have called up William Nylander's younger brother Alex to make his NHL debut. If this game needed any more kind of drama, it'll be his first NHL game. And I'm expecting now. It was about 75% Toronto fans on Saturday. It's a weekday, so I don't think the ratio is going to be that much, but I think it'll be predominantly Leaf fans, and should be an interesting game. But as I've said, 2-18-1 in their last 21 games in Buffalo, so that does not spell optimism for Leafs Nation about winning in Buffalo.
Well, the Red Wings are going to debut a guy tonight too. Evgeny Svechnikov is playing his first game tonight with the Red Wings. That's going to be kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, and Winnipeg called up Kyle Connor and Jack Roslovic, so there's a couple of their top prospects who are going to get their an NHL look. And Colin White got signed by Ottawa with all their injuries. Maybe he makes his NHL debut in the next couple days.
Yeah. I don't know. The Rangers looked good last night with JT Miller and the New York Rangers, which I was happy to promote. That was what came up on my Comcast. JT Miller's having a great year. Hats off to him for actually, but I don't, and I didn't mean to rip him. I just don't think he is like the New York Rangers guy. I still think, I'll still go with even Rick Nash, or I'll go with Lundqvist and the New York Rangers, or McDonough and the New York Rangers. But JT Miller and New York Rangers was pretty surprising.
Well, it's better than Tanner Glass and the New York Rangers.
Right. It is better than that. So, so the Leafs tonight will play. Who in the Buffalo Sabres? Who can we say in the Buffalo Sabres? They'll play.
Let's see. Marcus Foligno and the Buffalo Sabres.
Foligno and the Buffalo Sabres tonight. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.